During our sophomore year of college, I met Alicia, and we just clicked right away. She had this gorgeous auburn hair, piercing blue eyes, a face that could stop traffic, and legs that seemed to go on forever. To me, she was perfect. But what really got me was her energy. She was smart, full of life, and so much fun to be around. We could talk for hours about anything and everything. Before long, Alicia and I were inseparable, and after just 3 months of dating, we shared an incredibly intimate moment in the back seat of my car, parked behind the town's old baseball diamond. Up to that point, it was the most unforgettable night of my life. From then on, I was convinced we were meant to be together forever, or so I thought. Fast forward a bit, and I should probably introduce myself. My name's Jamie, short for James Turner. I'm from a decent-sized town in the Midwest, stand 6 feet tall, and weigh about 187 pounds. People say my sandy hair and brown eyes make me reasonably good-looking. I run a small contracting company with 5 employees, mostly focusing on interior upgrades for clients who want to add a touch of luxury to their homes. Alicia, meanwhile, is a music teacher at the local high school. Together, we had what I thought was a comfortable, happy life. We were in our early 30s and had started seriously talking about having kids soon. For the first 10 years of our marriage, I truly believed we were happy. Sure, we weren't intimate every single day, but a few times a week was typical, and every time felt meaningful and close. Every night we'd cuddle, and every morning I'd wake up feeling lucky to have Alicia as my wife. I'd have done anything for her without a second thought. Looking back now, I know I should be talking in the past tense. Out of nowhere, something hit me like a freight train, something I never saw coming and that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. As a contractor in the Midwest, my busiest seasons were summer and autumn. People didn't want their homes torn up during the bitterly cold winters, when snow piled up high. Because of this, Alicia and I typically took our vacations over Christmas, New Year's, or spring break. While I was swamped with work over the summer, she'd often visit her parents, go shopping with her sisters, or take some summer classes to keep her teaching license up to date. Our favorite winter escape was a trip somewhere sunny, and that particular winter, we booked a 2-week stay at an all-inclusive resort in the Bahamas. It was supposed to be 2 weeks in paradise, a chance for us to relax and reconnect. How wrong I was. Before we boarded the plane out of Minneapolis, I had no clue anything was off between us. If anyone had hinted that there was a problem in our marriage, I'd have laughed them off. To me, we were the perfect couple, deeply in love and absolutely inseparable. Our bond felt unbreakable, and I never imagined there could be a shadow waiting to unravel everything. The first hint that something was off came as we lined up at the security checkpoint at Minneapolis, St. Paul International Airport. The line was packed with people ready to escape the brutal cold for a slice of tropical paradise. And while we waited, I noticed a man in the line next to us glancing over at Alicia. Now, Alicia was no stranger to turning heads, but this was different. He wasn't just looking. He seemed like he was trying to catch her eye. I pretended to study my boarding pass but kept an eye on him, watching his quick, almost furtive glances. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught Alicia looking back at him. She made a small, subtle gesture that seemed to mean not here, not now. He nodded with a slight smile, and right then, my heart started to sink. They knew each other, but how well? I couldn't tell, and the realization made my stomach twist. As we shuffled through security, I stayed quiet, not wanting Alicia to catch on, but I kept watching them. There were no other glances, no more gestures, nothing to confirm what I'd seen. Alicia seemed deep in thought, which didn't make me feel any better. I silently hoped that the man wouldn't be on our flight. But when we finally boarded and found our seats, there he was, settled into an aisle seat about 15 rows ahead of us. I felt my heart pound even harder. Oddly, Alicia had chosen to sit in the aisle seat in our row, even though she always preferred the window. I'd booked her the window seat, but when I asked her about it, she just waved me off, saying she didn't feel great and didn't want to climb over anyone if she had to get up. I shrugged it off but then asked the person in the aisle seat if they'd mind switching, explaining that my wife might not feel well. They were kind enough to agree. Usually, I can sleep just fine on flights, especially long ones. But this time, my nerves were wound too tight. Even though I tilted my twin's baseball cap down and closed my eyes, I couldn't shake my unease. I felt Alicia's purse brush under the seat in front of her, and I tucked myself down, pretending to sleep but staying alert. About 15 minutes after takeoff, Alicia glanced down at me, almost as if checking if I was truly asleep. Then, quietly, she stood up and made her way to the restrooms. I adjusted in my seat, angling just enough to keep an eye on her without making it obvious. Sure enough, as she walked down the aisle, she slowed by the man's row, reaching out to steady herself as she passed and lightly brushing his shoulder. My stomach dropped. This was more than a passing glance or random encounter. They were connected somehow. They didn't look directly at each other, and she kept walking to the restroom without pausing. But when she came back, she looked at him straight on. In response, he stood up and walked right toward her. They met in the aisle, and instead of sidestepping each other, they paused. His hand rested on her waist, and she touched his chest for a brief moment. They both exchanged warm smiles, and his hand lingered on her waist, sliding downward as they held each other's gaze. This wasn't just a coincidence. As she walked past him, her hand slid down to his lower back, lingering in a way that made my stomach twist. Then, he placed his hand on her hip, and she smiled, a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. In that moment, any remaining illusions I had about our marriage shattered. This was no casual acquaintance. There was something real between them, something I was painfully on the outside of. I turned away, trying to keep my expression blank as she settled back into her seat and buckled her belt. But inside, I was drowning in a flood of questions and fears. How could Alicia do this to us? How long had this been going on? Who was this man to her? And just how deep did their relationship go? The rest of that flight was torture. I sat there, mind spinning with doubt and dread, while trying to ignore the sinking feeling that he'd be on our connecting flight to Nassau. And unfortunately, my gut was right. As soon as we boarded, I spotted him, 5 rows behind us, looking all too comfortable, pretending to be absorbed in the in-flight magazine. Meanwhile, Alicia suddenly felt well enough to take her usual window seat, acting as though nothing was wrong. The flight to Nassau was uneventful, but the tension was unbearable. When we landed, we grabbed our luggage, rented a car, and headed for the resort. As I drove, Alicia was busy texting. Trying to sound casual, I asked, "Who are you messaging?" "Oh, just my mom and sisters. Letting them know we arrived," she replied, way too casually. "Yeah, right," I thought, swallowing my frustration, though I desperately wanted to grab her phone and see for myself. Suspicion has a way of taking root and spreading, making you question every little thing. The resort room was stunning, with a balcony that looked out over the ocean and one of the resort pools. As we unpacked, I felt desperate to pull her back toward me, to remind her of what we had. I walked up behind her, wrapped my arms around her, and kissed her neck. "Do you know how much I love you?" I whispered, my voice shaky despite my best effort to keep it steady. Alicia turned, giving me a quick, distant peck on the lips. "I love you too, baby," she said, but her eyes looked far away, almost as if she was somewhere else entirely. A chill ran through me. I kissed her again, searching her face. "You know I'd never do anything to hurt you, Alicia, right?" She flinched, her shoulders tensing just slightly. "Of course, Jamie," she murmured, looking away. Tears glistened in her eyes, and she dropped her gaze to the floor. "You know I wouldn't either." Watching her, I felt an ache so deep it made it hard to breathe. I suddenly knew, without a doubt, that something had shifted between us. Whether she'd already crossed a line or not, I could feel it, the distance, the weight of secrets hanging in the air. Heart pounding, I let her go and stumbled into the bathroom, barely holding back my own tears. How had things come to this? What had I missed along the way? Could I even fix this? Or was it too late to save us? After splashing cold water on my face, I steadied myself and came out of the bathroom. Alicia was standing there, looking almost startled, her expression strange. "Oh my God, Jamie, I just got my period," she said, eyes wide. "And I didn't pack any tampons." I blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift. Wait, what? My period, she repeated. It just started. But I didn't bring anything with me. But, didn't you just have it a week ago? I asked, feeling bewildered. She shrugged, glancing away. I don't know. Sometimes it happens like that. I just stood there, wondering if it was some sort of excuse, a way to deflect or avoid the awkwardness of our situation. I wanted to believe her, but everything now felt like another piece of an unsolvable puzzle. Alicia quickly claimed, maybe the excitement of the trip just triggered it. I need to run to the gift shop and get some tampons, she said, and without waiting for my response, hurried out the door, leaving me standing there. My first thought was almost a relief. Maybe her period would actually slow things down between her and this other man, whoever he was. But the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. She'd been on the pill for years, and her cycle was like clockwork. Why would she suddenly lie about this? Then it hit me. She probably thought having her period would keep me from wanting to be intimate with her, letting her focus all her energy on her new friend. If that was her plan, I couldn't believe it. No one could be so heartless as to accept a trip I'd saved and planned for just to shut me out and give herself to another man. This was nothing like the woman I thought I'd been married to for over a decade. I felt like the floor was dropping out from under me, and I had no idea what to believe or where to turn. I looked around the room, desperate for answers, and noticed her phone sitting on the table beside the TV. In that moment, I didn't care if it was wrong. I had to know the truth. I picked it up, feeling a slight tremor in my hands. I wasn't sure if she'd changed her passcode, but when I unlocked the phone, it opened easily. She hadn't changed it. Another careless mistake on her part. I opened her messages, feeling my heart pound as I scrolled through. There, in plain sight, was a thread with someone named Michael Harris. I started at the top, scanning the messages, and I felt my chest tighten as the reality unfolded. The first message was from Michael as we were driving to the resort. Michael, hey baby. OMG, you look amazing. I can't wait to be with you. Alicia, you naughty boy. You almost got us caught by Jamie at the airport. Michael couldn't resist. Almost kissed you on the plane. Alicia, Jamie was fast asleep, so you could have. But it might have looked bad to others. I could barely breathe, my vision blurring as I read the rest of their exchange. Just as we'd reached our room, her phone buzzed again with another message from him. Michael, you in the lobby yet? Alicia, no, I'm in my room. Jamie's in the bathroom, acting strange. His response was immediate and it was brutal. Michael, who cares? When's he leaving so I can have you all to myself? I couldn't believe the coldness of his words, but what hurt even more was Alicia's response. Alicia, I've told you from the start, Mike, that I can't and won't just walk away. Jamie's a wonderful husband who loves me, takes care of me, and gives me a life you never could. For a brief second, I felt a glimmer of hope. But then Michael fired back, taunting me in the worst way possible. Michael, yeah, but my manhood is bigger and better than his, and you know I satisfy you more than he ever could. Alicia, oh yes, no one satisfies me like you do, baby. You take me to places Jamie has never even imagined. The pain was like a knife twisting in my gut. She'd been lying to my face, betraying every ounce of trust I'd ever placed in her. And then the final words that shattered me completely. Alicia, Jamie and I are planning to start a family, so these next 2 weeks are just for you. Baby, I told Jamie I'd stop taking my birth control pills when we got back. The enormity of her betrayal hit me full force. Not only had she been lying, but she was planning a future with me that involved bringing a child into this mess. All while giving herself to another man. My hands shook as I put her phone down, feeling like I'd been struck in the chest. The messages continued, each one more devastating than the last. Alicia, when we get home, I'll tell him I'm ready to start trying for a baby. But really, I stopped taking my pills almost 3 weeks ago. Now you have a chance to get me pregnant here. If you conceive a child with me in the next 2 weeks, Jamie will end up raising your kid, never suspecting a thing. Michael's reply was sickening. Michael, you're so naughty, and I love it. Can't wait to put a baby in that sweet belly of yours. Alicia's response hit even harder. Alicia, God, you're turning me on. I can't wait to feel you inside me. Michael, ever the pragmatist, asked, what about Jamie, though? How do you know he won't, fertilize you in the next 2 weeks? Alicia dismissed his question with a laugh. Because he won't get the chance, silly. I'll tell him my period started again and that it'll probably last the whole vacation. Oh, Michael sounded skeptical. Are you sure he'll buy that? But Alicia replied with chilling confidence. Absolutely. He loves me and trusts me completely. Besides, I'll make it up to him when we get back home. Michael's next message was a dagger to my heart. Michael, damn, he's so stupid. What a loser. Alicia pushed back, almost defending me, but only half-heartedly. Quit calling him that, or you'll lose access to me for good. Michael brushed it off. We both know you won't let that happen. You need me too much. Finally, Alicia conceded. That's true, but I still don't appreciate you talking about Jamie like that. He's a good guy. The last message made my blood boil. Michael, all right, meet me in the lobby. I need to kiss those sweet lips. Both sets. But I'll settle for the ones on your face for now. I stood there, frozen, mind racing. Part of me wanted to storm out and confront her right then and there, but a more rational side quickly took over. Divorce was inevitable. There was no way I could stay married to a woman who had schemed like this. But I also knew I couldn't just walk away quietly. I needed proof, something ironclad that would let me hit her where it hurt. I glanced at her phone in my hand and briefly considered swapping it with mine to keep all these messages as leverage. But then I thought, no, she's the one who dug this hole. Let her find her own way out of it. I stuffed both phones in my pocket, knowing she'd realize hers was gone eventually, but I planned to be long gone by then. A wave of nausea swept over me, and I barely stopped myself from retching. I staggered over to the window, looking out blankly at the picturesque view of the Caribbean. The same view I'd been looking forward to for months. Just 8 hours ago, I was one of the happiest men alive, excited to spend 2 blissful weeks with the woman I thought was my soul mate. But in just a few short hours, my entire world had come crashing down around me. I had never felt so alone, so betrayed, or so furious in my life. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to destroy both of them, to make them feel even a fraction of the humiliation and rage coursing through me. But thankfully, the rational part of my mind kicked in before I could act on impulse. Divorce was the only way forward, but it wasn't enough. I needed a way to make sure Alicia paid for everything she'd put me through. Still gripping the phone, I continued staring out at the ocean. Looking down at the pool, I spotted them, Alicia and Michael, wrapped around each other, locked in a deep, passionate kiss. Michael's hands moved over her body without hesitation, and the sight made me feel physically sick. But I took a steadying breath and grabbed the video camera I'd brought for our vacation, now repurposed for capturing undeniable proof of what was happening right in front of me. Alicia must have overlooked the fact that our room had a perfect, elevated view of the pool. With the zoom, I could clearly record every damning detail of their embrace, even though watching it made my skin crawl. But I knew I needed this evidence. As I recorded, questions raced through my mind. How did they plan to get alone time with me right here? They had to have a strategy to keep me occupied. And as I thought it over, a simple plan began to form in my mind. Alicia had come here for 2 weeks with Michael, likely hoping to conceive a child with him. But I had a chance to turn that plan on its head. Why not start right now? But first, I needed to figure out how they intended to keep me out of the way. I kept recording as they shared one last kiss, then watched Alicia as she reluctantly pulled herself away and left the pool area. She'd be back soon, and I needed to be ready. I headed to the bathroom and turned on the shower, hoping the steam and hot water would help clear my head. If she asked, I'd say I needed to wash off the travel grime and unwind. 5 minutes later, I heard the door open and shut, followed by Alicia's voice calling out, I'm back. I got us some water and my tampons. Great, I called, doing my best to sound casual. I'll be out in a minute, but something didn't add up. Why would she get water when the resort had already stocked our room with plenty? And then, like a bolt of lightning, it hit me. She planned to slip something into my drink. If I refused it, she'd be suspicious, but if I drank it, they'd have free rein to meet up while I was out cold. I shut off the shower, drying off slowly as I tried to piece together my next move. Then Alicia knocked on the door, her voice tinged with what might have been concern or just impatience. "You okay in there? You've been in for a while." I swallowed my anger, forcing myself to stay calm. When I opened the door, I saw her by the bed, sipping from her own water bottle and holding out another, already opened, for me. "Here, we need to stay hydrated in this climate," she said lightly, her eyes avoiding mine. I took the bottle and pretended to take a big drink before slipping back into the bathroom. There, I spit the water into the sink and quietly emptied the rest of the bottle. To avoid suspicion, I filled it with fresh water from the sink and took it back out. Alicia was busy unpacking, completely unaware of what I'd done. I took a few casual sips and glanced around, noticing a red dress laid out on the bed. "Is that for dinner?" I asked, pretending to be excited. "Seems a shame if we don't go." Alicia smiled, but there was something forced about it. "I brought it, so I might as well wear it," she said, shrugging. "But aren't you tired from the travel?" I could practically hear her hint. She wanted me to be too worn out to tag along, but I wasn't about to make this easy for her. Bingo! She had definitely slipped something into my water. Now that I knew, I had to play this carefully. I pretended to feel drowsy, taking another pretend sip even as adrenaline shot through my veins. "Now that you mention it, I could use some rest," I said, faking a heavy yawn. "What time's dinner?" "Not for a couple of hours. Why don't you lie down? I'll wake you up when it's time," she suggested, her voice laced with a thin layer of concern that felt completely fake. I nodded, letting my eyelids droop a little. "All right, honey, just don't let me oversleep. I want to spend every moment with you," I added, emphasizing the last words. "Love you so much." I watched closely, catching the slight flicker of discomfort in her eyes. "Love you too," she murmured, but her words felt like a cold slap. I lay down, closed my eyes and slowed my breathing, letting it fall into a rhythm that would make it seem like I'd fallen asleep. It didn't take long before I heard her whispering into her phone. "It worked. He's out." "How long do you think he'll stay asleep?" she asked, her voice filled with excitement. A giggle followed. "We've got the whole night," she purred. "I'll meet you at the bar in an hour. Need to freshen up first," she added, laughing. "You're so bad." "Can't wait, lover. Bye." As soon as she hung up, I watched her through barely open eyes as she laid out her plan. She moved over to her suitcase, carefully choosing lingerie, a thong and a push-up bra. I could feel my blood boiling, but I stayed motionless, keeping up the pretense. Then she went into the bathroom and turned on the shower. This was my chance. I got up quietly and crept over to her purse, searching until I found a small, unmarked bottle of capsules. I took 5 of them, wrapped them in a tissue, and hid them in my pocket as evidence. Then I placed the bottle exactly as I'd found it, slipped back into bed, and shut my eyes just as she finished her shower. She took her time getting ready, nearly 45 minutes, and then finally left the room. As soon as the door closed, I was up, springing into action. My mind was spinning with one goal: get as much evidence as possible, ruin their little vacation, and get a head start on the divorce. I grabbed my camera and headed down to the bar. The resort was small, with only 2 bars by the ocean, and it didn't take me long to spot them. Alicia was wearing that red dress I'd once loved, but now it only fueled my anger. I found a good hiding spot behind a couple of palm trees where I could record without being seen. The camera's zoom feature was perfect for this. The bar wasn't too crowded, which made it easy to spot Alicia and Michael laughing, touching, and whispering to each other like 2 teenagers. It was everything I needed for proof, and more than enough to turn my stomach. I kept the camera steady, recording as they kissed, touched, and held each other like they were on their own private vacation. They looked exactly how Alicia and I had looked on our past trips together, and the betrayal hit me all over again. After about an hour, a DJ started playing music, and they moved to the dance floor. Watching them sway together, arms around each other, almost made me walk away, but I knew I had to see this through. When they finally left the dance floor, They moved toward a more private area, and I followed at a safe distance, staying just out of sight. They paused to kiss again, deeply, oblivious to everyone around them. I gripped the camera tighter, knowing that with each second I recorded, I was gathering the proof I needed to finally break free from this nightmare. As I recorded, they made their way to his room, a small, ground-floor unit tucked at the back of the resort with no ocean view. Probably on a budget, I thought bitterly. They went inside, and I crept closer, determined to capture everything, even if it twisted the knife deeper. Through the open window, I filmed them as they undressed, touching each other in ways that made my blood boil. Michael was well endowed, sure, but that did nothing to excuse the betrayal, nor the fact that they planned to use him to conceive a child she intended for me to unknowingly raise. I kept the camera rolling as they went at it, gritting my teeth as it dragged on far too long. The guy wasn't just smug, he had an unreal level of stamina, too. Nearly midnight had passed, and I thought Alicia would be heading back to our room soon. But then their conversation caught my attention. "Are those pills safe? I don't want him, passing out or having a seizure," Alicia asked, with an unexpected note of concern. "How touching," I thought sarcastically. "Don't worry, babe," Michael replied. "He'll be out for at least 6 more hours. He might wake up with a headache, but that's it. You only used 1 pill, right?" "Yeah, just 1. Why, what happens with 2? She asked. Michael chuckled, completely unfazed. "Nah, 2 would knock him out for 12 hours or more. Just stick with 1 before bedtime, and we can spend every night together. I want you pregnant by the time we leave." He paused, pulling something from his pocket. "Here, an extra key card to my room. If you can sneak away during the day, just call me, and we'll meet up here." Their laughter grated on me, stoking a fury I could barely keep contained. Having seen and heard enough, I slipped away and returned to our room. I needed a plan to end this farce once and for all, to make them feel every ounce of betrayal they'd put me through. Watching them act like I was some gullible fool, a clueless accessory in their twisted plan, fueled a need for justice I'd never felt before. Back in the room, I reviewed the recordings. As painful as it was to watch, I let each image, each word of their whispered plans, cement my resolve. First, I needed to get Alicia out of the way so I could handle her lover privately. Maybe I'd slip something into his drink, like she'd done to me, and rough him up while he was out cold. He wouldn't know what hit him, and with no way to identify me, I'd walk away free. But first, I needed a way to separate them for a few hours. Then it hit me, the spa. The resort had a spa offering massages, facials, the works. I'd treat Alicia to a day of pampering. A thoughtful gift from a loving husband. If she balked, I'd guilt-trip her into it, just like she'd done to me. She'd have no choice but to accept, and it would keep her busy while I dealt with her lover. I changed into shorts and lay in bed, seething over thoughts of them together and the revenge I'd take. I waited, eyes shut, as around 5 a.m., Alicia finally crept back into the room. I stayed still, pretending to be in a deep, drugged sleep while she quietly slid under the covers beside me. At 7 a.m., my plan was ready to go into motion. I pretended to wake up, stretching and yawning as if I just had the most restful sleep of my life. Alicia was still sound asleep, so I showered quickly and headed straight to the spa to set the plan in motion. It opened early, and I booked the longest package available, a 3-hour session. For the earliest slot they had open that afternoon at 2 p.m. With that in place, I explored the resort grounds a bit to kill some time, then headed back to the room around 9 a.m. Alicia was still in bed, so I took a quiet look at her phone. There was a fresh message from Michael. "You were amazing last night. Any chance you can sneak away from Jamie for some afternoon fun?" My rage flared, but I pushed it down, instead leaning over and gently kissing Alicia on the forehead as she started to stir. "Morning," I murmured, feigning an apologetic smile. "Sorry about last night, falling asleep and messing up our dinner plans. But I have a little surprise for you." She yawned and smiled back, her expression still hazy with sleep. "Oh? What's the surprise?" "I booked you a spa day to make up for last night," I said, my voice warm. "Just wanted to show you how much I care." Even in her half-awake state, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. A small, almost imperceptible flinch. She recovered quickly, giving me a weak smile, but I could tell she was uncertain, maybe even a bit thrown. "Everything okay?" I asked, studying her face. "Do you like the gift?" "Yes, I love it." "Thank you," she replied, her voice hesitant. "I just wish you'd asked me first," she added with a feeble smile. "Well, it wouldn't have been much of a surprise if I'd asked," I said, chuckling lightly. "No rush, though your appointment's not until 2 p.m., so we've got plenty of time to relax together this morning." She nodded slowly, managing a half-hearted smile. "You're thoughtful." "Thanks." She kissed me on the cheek, and I caught a strange, fishy odor on her breath. "Go freshen up, and we'll grab some breakfast," I said, standing up and heading to the window. As she took her purse and slipped into the bathroom, I glanced out the window and saw Michael by the pool, casually chatting up a couple of women and glancing at his phone every now and then. He seemed completely unbothered by the spa setup I'd planned for Alicia. It occurred to me he might even be hedging his bets, lining up some backup company in case she couldn't sneak away. About an hour later, Alicia and I were sitting at the breakfast buffet. I loaded my plate with everything in sight, while she only picked at a few pieces of fruit and a cup of coffee. "Not hungry, babe?" I asked, feigning concern. "Is it because of, your period?" "Oh yeah," she replied, a bit distracted. "Just not feeling like eating much." I couldn't help but wonder what Michael had texted her to put that distant look in her eyes. But it didn't matter, the plan was moving along perfectly. After breakfast, we took a walk along the beach. I brought my camera along and filmed everything. The waves, the palm trees, Alicia beside me. She smiled for the camera, but behind it, I could see the guilt and uncertainty in her eyes. I turned to her and asked softly, "What's wrong, babe? Are you okay?" "Fine, just a bit tired." "Do you mind if I go back to the room for a nap before my spa appointment?" Alicia asked, clearly itching to get away. "Sure, no problem. I know it must be tough being on vacation and, well, having your period," I said, laying on a sympathetic tone. "You go rest up, and I'll see you after your spa treatment." She nodded and headed back toward the resort without another word. I watched her walk away, feeling a strange mix of anger and satisfaction. Now it was time to find Michael and start making my own moves. As I wandered down the beach, lost in thought, I noticed two couples heading in my direction. The women were the same ones I'd seen with Michael earlier, but now they had two big guys with them who looked like they could easily play in the NFL. As they got closer, I caught bits of their conversation. "Come on, babe, don't be like that. You knew Dave and I wanted to go deep-sea fishing, and they had 2 spots open. We'll be back before dinner," one of the guys said, clearly trying to smooth things over. "Sure, you guys always do whatever you want while we're stuck here at the hotel," one of the women shot back, clearly annoyed. "Babe, there's plenty to do here. You could go shopping in town, relax by the pool, or hit the gym," he suggested, sounding hopeful. "Are you saying I'm fat?" she snapped. "No, babe, that's not what I meant. I just meant there's lots you could do here," he stammered, desperately backpedaling. They continued bickering as they walked past, heading back to the resort with him still pleading his case. After they disappeared, I continued wandering along the beach, formulating my next move. Eventually, I made my way toward Michael's room, half worried that Alicia might have skipped the spa to be with him. When I reached his door, I could hear voices inside, but none of them sounded like Alicia's. I figured it was worth the risk to get some footage, so I carefully positioned my camera on the window ledge, aiming it into the room. I set it to record on its own, then hid a few feet away, keeping an eye on the door. Time dragged on, but my patience paid off. After about 20 minutes, the door opened, and the 2 women from earlier walked out, giggling and looking way too pleased with themselves. I waited until they were out of sight, then retrieved the camera and slipped back to my room. With Alicia occupied at the spa, I had a solid chunk of time to review the footage. Back in the room, I downloaded all the videos to my laptop, bracing myself for what I might see. Most of it, as expected, was footage of Alicia and Michael, their intimate moments painful to relive. But the latest video floored me. The 2 women had apparently spent their afternoon in a full-on threesome with Michael. It was like something out of a cheap porn movie. One of them with him while the other watched and entertained herself, and then they'd switch, laughing and joking about his size in between. It was clear now. Michael had no loyalty to anyone, not even Alicia. This footage wasn't just proof of his betrayal, but also a crucial piece of leverage. A new, sharper plan started forming in my mind. If I timed everything right, I could be back home while Alicia was left here scrambling to figure out what happened. Knowing her, she'd probably try to slip another pill into my drink that night, hoping to keep me knocked out while she snuck off to meet Michael. So I'd play along, pretend to be out cold, wait for her to head to the bar to meet him, and then I'd make my move. If I could get close enough near the end of their night, I'd slip one of those pills into each of their drinks. By the time they made it back to his room, they'd both be out cold, and when they woke up, I'd be long gone. Timing would be everything, but I was ready to take the risk. To cover myself, I made a DVD of Michael's latest escapades with the two women. There was a twinge of jealousy, seeing how easily he'd convinced two attractive women to join him, but I shoved that aside. This was about evidence. I made 2 copies of the footage and then backed up all the recordings, burning everything onto a separate DVD. I went down to the front desk and mailed the backup disc to my brother, Robert, along with a note telling him not to watch it or let anyone know he had it, only to keep it safe in case something went wrong or Alicia and Michael tried to hurt me. At the very least, the backup would make sure the truth came out if anything happened to me. With that done, I checked the time. Alicia's spa appointment should be ending soon. I took a quick stroll around the resort, trying to figure out where the two women and their boyfriends were staying. If I could get this to play out right, the boyfriends would find out exactly what their girlfriends had been up to with Michael. After a few minutes, I spotted the two women lounging by the pool, towels in hand. I followed at a distance, watching as they eventually gathered their things and headed back to their rooms. As I suspected, they entered rooms right next to each other, a perfect setup for my plan. Back in my room, I called the airline and booked the earliest flight home I could find for the next morning. Unfortunately, the soonest I could get was 10 a.m., a bit later than I'd hoped, but I reserved it anyway. I also went to the front desk and let them know that my wife and I had a family emergency and would need to check out in the morning. They expressed their sympathies, and I thanked them, fully committed to seeing this through. Even if everything didn't go exactly as planned, I'd still be on the flight home, leaving Alicia to pick up the pieces. But if things did work out, she'd be stranded here, thinking she had everything under control while her world fell apart. The plan was straightforward. First, let her slip a pill in my drink, play along, and pretend to be out. Then, when she met up with Michael, I'd slip them each a pill of their own. By the time they realized what happened, I'd be miles in the air, heading back to start a new life, one where she'd have to face the mess she'd made alone. Alicia thought she'd pulled it off, slipping the pill into my drink to get me out of the way and give her and Michael their alone time. As I drank, I kept a calm smile, making it easy for her to believe her plan was working. Step 1 was in motion. Act drowsy, pass out, and let her think she had the freedom she needed. Once she left, I'd move to step 2. Head to the bar, wait for the right moment, and spike their drinks with those same pills. If the timing was perfect, they'd either pass out just before reaching his room or right after. But that wasn't all. Once they were knocked out, I'd move on to step 3, drag Alicia back to our room, then clean Michael out, take his wallet, cash, and passport. Step 4 involved a little extra chaos. I'd slide copies of the DVD I'd made of Michael's afternoon activities under the doors of those two women's rooms, hoping their boyfriends would be the ones to find and watch them. They'd be livid, and the fallout would be perfect. Finally, for Alicia, I'd empty everything from her wallet except her clothes and purse, leaving a note in the empty wallet so she'd know exactly who'd bested her. With all my steps set, it was just a matter of waiting. Alicia returned to the room at 5:30, looking relaxed and radiant. It hurt to see her like that, glowing as if everything was perfect. "Jamie, thank you so much for the spa day. It was amazing. I feel like a whole new woman," she said, smiling. "I'm glad you liked it. When I first mentioned it, you didn't seem too excited, but I'm happy you enjoyed it. I just wanted to show you how much I care." I noticed a brief flinch and a glimmer of tears in her eyes. Thank you again. I really loved it. And I love you, she said, trying to sound sincere. Anytime, babe. We've got dinner reservations for 7 o'clock. How about we rest a bit and then get ready? She nodded and slipped into the bathroom with her purse. A few minutes later, she returned holding 2 water bottles, handing one to me with a smile. Drink up. I plan on hitting the dance floor tonight, so you better start hydrating, she said, winking. I forced a chuckle. All right. Just let me hit the bathroom first. I followed the usual routine, emptying the bottle and refilling it with tap water, flushing for effect. Then, I returned to the bedroom, taking sips now and then and pretending to slowly fade into sleep. After about 15 minutes, I began my sleepy act, lying back and letting my breathing slow. I cracked an eye open just enough to watch Alicia prepare for what she thought would be a perfect night with Michael. She showered and changed, clearly excited for her secret evening. As she was in the bathroom, I grabbed her phone, needing to check their messages. Alicia, can't slip away this afternoon. Jamie bought me a spa package, couldn't say no. Michael, no problem, babe. Got other plans for now. Still on for tonight? Alicia, absolutely. Need that big, hard Johnson and its seed for our baby. Michael, can't wait to be between your legs and hear you scream. My love, the fury surged again, but I forced myself to keep it together. I put the phone back, and as Alicia emerged, practically glowing with anticipation, I lay there pretending to be fast asleep, letting her believe her plans were still perfectly on track. Reading that disgusting exchange, I felt my rage pulse again, but the satisfaction of knowing the end was near kept me steady. All I had to do was follow them to the bar, watch for my moment, and spike their drinks. I rummaged through Alicia's purse and found the key card to Michael's room, slipping it into my pocket before putting everything back exactly as it was. Alicia took her time getting ready, clearly primping for her so-called perfect night. But then, unexpectedly, she sat beside me, her hand gentle on my cheek. Baby, after this week, I'll be all yours. I swear it, she whispered softly, a bittersweet look in her eyes. I just needed to get this out of my system before we start a family. I wish I could have told you that you'd understand, but I had to do this. These next few days are for me. She leaned down and kissed my cheek, her voice thick with what I guessed was her twisted version of love. I do love you, Jamie. More than you know. I just needed this. The words sounded so absurd I almost scoffed, but I forced myself to stay still, letting her believe her little confession made a difference. Her guilt was too little, too late. As soon as she left the room, I got up, dressed, and followed a short distance behind. They'd gone to the same bar as the night before, which was even busier tonight. I spotted the 2 women and their boyfriends from earlier. If my plan went well, they wouldn't be together by morning. I settled into my hiding spot near the edge of the bar, setting up my camera to capture everything. The night unfolded just as I'd expected. Alicia and Michael found a table, laughing and talking, enjoying themselves like they hadn't a care in the world. It was nearly time to make my move. I waited until their waitress took their drink order, carefully listening as she relayed it to the bartender. Then, I flagged down another bartender and ordered the exact same drinks. As the first bartender prepared theirs, I discreetly opened a capsule and mixed its contents into each glass, stirring quickly to ensure it dissolved. The drinks fizzed a bit, but once the bubbles settled, they looked normal. With a drink in each hand, I made my way through the bustling bar, moving in close and quickly swapping their tampered drinks for the originals. The crowded atmosphere concealed my movements perfectly. I returned to my spot outside, watching and waiting. It was just after 1 a.m. If the pills worked as planned, they'd be out cold until at least 11 a.m., fitting my strategy to the letter. Now I just needed them to finish their drinks and head to Michael's room. But as they sat there, slowly sipping and chatting, anxiety started gnawing at me. What if they didn't finish? What if the pills weren't as effective? The tension was almost unbearable. Just then, my worries were cut short. When Michael leaned toward Alicia and whispered something, they both quickly downed their drinks and left the bar. Perfect. I followed at a distance as they made their way to his room, watching as Alicia began to stumble, struggling to keep her balance. Michael wrapped his arm around her waist, helping her along, but by the time they reached the door, he was also starting to stagger. The pills were kicking in right on time. Michael fumbled with the key card, finally managing to open the door, and they both stumbled inside. I waited a few moments before slipping in the key card I'd taken from Alicia's purse. Inside, I could hear Michael's slurred voice. "What's wrong with you, babe? You didn't drink that much," he muttered, clearly confused and fighting to stay conscious. Approaching the bed, I saw Alicia already sprawled face down, fully out. Michael was trying to shake her awake, muttering, "Come on, babe. It's time to make a baby." Just then, he noticed me. "Hey, who the hell are you?" he demanded, trying to stand but wobbling. I smirked. "I'm just her husband. Now, why don't you do us all a favor and pass out?" I watched as his eyes glazed over, and, right on cue, he collapsed to the floor, barely conscious. I walked over to his phone, which had fallen out of his pocket, and started scrolling through it, curious about what else the sleazebag was hiding. What I found was beyond anything I'd imagined. There were hundreds of pictures, some harmless but many incriminating. One folder was filled with images of women in various stages of undress, some even engaged in activities with him. Among them were multiple photos of Alicia, but that wasn't all. As I scrolled further, I realized that some of the women were teachers from Alicia's school and even wives of male teachers. It was clear Michael got his thrills from seducing married women, something I planned to make sure would backfire spectacularly. I checked his contact list and quickly tagged and shared the photos, except the ones with Alicia, to everyone on his contact list, including several husbands of the wives he'd photographed. He'd be in for a shock when he got back home, that was certain. Then, I sent the photos and videos of Alicia from Michael's phone to her phone and, from there, to mine as a backup. Blackmail material, if needed. Satisfied, I powered off his phone and began gathering his things, tossing clothes, toiletries, and anything he'd brought on the trip into his suitcase. I checked his pockets, taking all his cash, wallet, credit cards, driver's license, and, most importantly, his passport. Without that, leaving the island would be nearly impossible. As I moved back toward the door, I couldn't help but smile. With Michael's suitcase packed and disposed of, I turned my attention to Alicia, still lying face down on the bed. Carefully, I rolled her onto her back and carried her back to our room, laying her on our bed. Then I returned to Michael's room one last time, making sure there was nothing left for him to retrieve. I even tossed his shoes and his suitcase in the resort's dumpster, covering them with trash to ensure they stayed hidden. Back in my room, I packed up both mine and Alicia's suitcases, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back, her purse, a few tampons, and an empty wallet with a note I'd written to let her know exactly who had orchestrated her downfall. It was around 4 a.m., and with my flight scheduled for 10 a.m., I estimated that Alicia, who had finished her spiked drink at about 2 a.m., would be out cold until at least noon. Michael might start coming around by 10 a.m., but by then, I'd be long gone. Before leaving the room, I grabbed the 2 DVDs I'd burned earlier. Quietly, I slipped one under the door of each room where the 2 women and their boyfriends were staying, knowing it would be a brutal awakening for those relationships. Then, I returned to my room, taking one last look at Alicia lying there, peacefully asleep. The sight stirred a deep sense of sadness in me. I'd once looked forward to starting a family with her, but after what she'd done, any thought of forgiveness was gone. I double-checked her purse, confirming that it was completely empty. No money, no credit cards, and no passport. She would struggle just as much as Michael to make her way home. Finally, I grabbed her suitcase and tossed it into the same dumpster where I'd thrown Michael's belongings. Exhausted, I slumped into a chair, my mind racing with what to do once I got back home. First on the list was to drain our bank accounts and cancel all our credit cards. Then I'd pack up my own things, leave our house, and probably stash everything in a storage unit. I just needed to get out of that house, out of the facade of our marriage, and away from any reminders of the betrayal. At some point, I must have dozed off because when I woke, it was nearly 7 a.m. Forcing myself up, I took one last look at Alicia and then carefully carried her out of the room. Down by the pool, I found a quiet lounge chair, where I laid her down gently, knowing she'd still be out cold when the morning cleaning crew came through. Back in the room, I grabbed my bags and did a final sweep to make sure I hadn't left anything behind. I realized I still had Michael's phone, and a new idea struck. Returning to where I'd left Alicia, I grabbed her phone as well, then started sending all the photos and videos. I sent every damning photo and video to everyone in Alicia's contact list, sparing only her young nieces, nephews, and close family members. But her friends, co-workers, and siblings? They deserved to know. To make things worse for her, I went to the front desk and asked for a small piece of Scotch tape. Then I removed her phone's battery, placed the tape over the contacts, and reinserted it. It would appear as though her phone had died, and without a charger, she'd be stuck. By around 8 a.m., the fallout began. I heard shouting echoing down the hall. One of the boyfriends of the women who had been with Michael had evidently found the DVD I'd left. "You cheat. Tell your family the wedding's off. I never want to see you again," he yelled, his voice breaking. Meanwhile, the other guy just stood there, his silence almost worse than the shouting, while his girlfriend pleaded, "Please, baby, don't leave me. I'm sorry. It was a stupid mistake. Go back to your new guy," he said coldly. "He might have a bigger Johnson, but I doubt it'll be working too well after what we did to him." I couldn't help but wonder what they'd done to Michael, but I guessed I'd never know. Not long after, the wail of an ambulance broke through the resort's usual quiet, and I saw the manager rushing to lead EMTs to Michael's room. As a crowd gathered, I quietly slipped away and hailed a cab to the airport. In the cab, I powered on my phone to find a voicemail from my brother, Robert. "Jamie, what's going on? I just got a bunch of pics and, well, some explicit videos of Alicia. I mean, she's hot, but what's the deal? Do you know anything about this? Call me back." At the airport, I called him back, giving him the full rundown, how Alicia had been cheating with Michael, even scheming to get pregnant by him. At first, Robert thought I was kidding, but when I told him to check the videos, his shock turned into sincere support. He apologized, offered to help however he could, and told me to let him know if I needed anything. I thanked him, hung up, and soon found myself flying home, alone. Once I landed, I turned on Michael's phone to find an explosion of furious voicemails and texts. The photos and videos I'd sent out had definitely hit their mark. I collected my bags, retrieved my car from the airport lot, and headed home, my mind turning to the next steps. Divorce was an option, but giving her half didn't feel like justice. So, as I drove, I thought of another plan. She'd destroyed our marriage, so I'd make her life a living hell in return. I called Robert again, asking if he'd help me move my things out of the house before Alicia returned. He agreed immediately. My phone was soon flooded with messages, mostly from Alicia's family asking where she was. There were no texts from Alicia herself, which meant she probably hadn't figured out the full extent of the situation yet. I couldn't help but smirk, imagining her discovering the mess I'd left. First things first, I canceled our joint credit cards, emptied our shared accounts, and transferred everything to a private account. After transferring all the money, I started packing up my things, ruthlessly throwing out any gifts Alicia had ever given me, and unplugging the house phone. By 11 p.m., I saw the frantic texts from her coming through on my cell. "Where are you? Why did you leave me? Are you okay?" Then, as it began to sink in, "Why did you do this? Couldn't we have just talked?" I ignored her messages, knowing it would only frustrate her more. The next day was a blur. I wasn't sure when she'd manage to get back, so I had to move quickly. First, I picked up boxes and rented a large storage unit. Then, I went to the bank, drained our joint account, and transferred everything to my business account. For a moment, I thought about leaving town entirely, but there were some final loose ends to tie up. Our house was nothing fancy. A small starter home with 2 bedrooms, a tiny bathroom, and a modest kitchen. At one point, I dreamed of fixing it up, maybe raising a family there. Now, my plans had changed. Alicia was going to get a homecoming she'd never forget. Later that morning, my brother Robert came over with his pickup truck, and we started loading up all my belongings. It took 3 trips to the storage unit, a solid 5 hours of lifting and packing, but by afternoon, I was officially moved out. I didn't mention to Robert what I had in mind for the house or what kind of surprise I had planned for Alicia. I knew he'd just try to talk me out of it. At one point, he asked what I intended to do about the marriage. So, what's next? Are you getting a lawyer? Or just skipping town? I'm leaving, I said firmly, and I'm not divorcing her. She can keep the house if she wants. But that's all she's getting. Robert frowned. That's not gonna work. She'll get a lawyer and track you down. Just divorce her, split things up evenly, and be done with it. Running off won't end it. Don't let anger drive this. Be smart and responsible. No way, I shot back. She betrayed me and tried to pass off another man's child as mine. I'm not giving her the satisfaction of a clean break. She's getting nothing. I'm exposing her lies and leaving her penniless. Seeing I was set on my plan, Robert left with a sigh, advising me to reconsider. But I knew what I had to do. The moment I saw her with Michael, my mind was made up. That night, I began tearing through the house with a single-minded focus. I didn't know when she'd return, so I worked quickly, stripping out anything of value or use. Fortunately, a massive snowstorm was forecasted, shutting down airports and likely delaying her even more. The snow would also help cover my tracks. Ignoring the barrage of calls and messages, I finally picked up one of Alicia's calls, curious to see what she'd say. Her voice came through, desperate, full of tears, admitting her mistakes, and begging to make things right. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. I was way past caring. But I played along, hinting that maybe, just maybe, there was a slim chance of reconciliation, before pulling that possibility away. "Why did you do this to us?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Don't you love me anymore?" I kept my tone steady, even adding a touch of sorrow. "Did you even love me, Alicia? It meant nothing, baby. Please, just forgive me," she sobbed, her desperation palpable. I paused, letting her sweat. "I don't know if we can fix this. We can get through this, Jamie," she pleaded, her voice full of false hope. "Our love will be even stronger. I swear." "I'm not sure," I replied, keeping her on edge. "When are you coming back?" "I'm stuck here without a passport or ticket," she admitted, sounding defeated. "My sister's wiring me some money since my credit cards got stolen." "Oh, and could you cancel those cards, please?" "I'll handle it," I answered coolly. "But when do you think you'll be back?" "Probably in a few days, once I get a new passport from the consulate," she replied, a hint of relief in her voice. "Let me know when you're leaving," I said. "I will, Jamie. I love you. See you when I'm back." "Yeah. See you then," I replied, hanging up. The best part was that she wouldn't be back for a few days. It gave me time to wrap up everything and prepare for my new life, far away from her. The next day, my brother Robert called, checking in and inviting me over for dinner. The offer of a home-cooked meal was a welcome relief after a week of takeout, so I accepted, reassuring him that I wouldn't do anything rash. Later, Alicia called again, her tone eager this time. "Hey, babe. Good news. I'll be getting my new passport in a couple of days. All I need now is a plane ticket and I could be back in a few days, maybe in the afternoon. Could you pick me up from the airport? I really want us to talk as soon as I'm back." I held back a chuckle. "I don't think that's a good idea, Alicia. You should have your sister pick you up." "We'll talk when you get home," I said, knowing I'd be long gone by then. "Oh, okay, babe. I love you, and I know we can work through this. Just give us a chance, okay?" she said, practically begging. "Yeah, we'll talk when you're back." No promises, though, I lied, mirroring her own deceitful tone. Now that I knew exactly when she'd return, I had time to tie up all the loose ends before disappearing. First, I sold my work truck and bought another one under a friend's name to keep my trail cold. Then, I informed my employees I was closing the business due to personal reasons. It was abrupt, but they needed to know. Next, I reached out to an old college buddy in Colorado who'd once floated the idea of starting a business together. He was shocked to hear what had happened with Alicia, having known us back when we were dating and thinking we were perfect together. But when I asked if his offer was still on the table, he welcomed me to join him. I requested to work off the books to avoid Alicia potentially tracking me down for money. With every last piece of my escape plan falling into place, there was just one thing left: to get out before Alicia returned. She continued calling me nonstop, begging, apologizing, but by now, her words didn't affect me at all. Alicia continued calling, professing her love, but I was resolute. The day before her return, I loaded up my new truck, cleared out the last of my things, and left early the next morning, determined to slip out of town unnoticed. I'd asked my neighbor to record Alicia's arrival, promising him a surprise for her, though I didn't reveal the true nature of it. He agreed, completely unaware of our marital issues, and waited for my call. As I drove away, leaving my old life with Alicia in the rearview mirror, I felt an unexpected sense of liberation. Rage and despair had followed me around ever since catching her with Michael, but now, it was as though hitting rock bottom had propelled me to finally climb back up. I had a long drive ahead to reach my friend's place in Colorado, and by the time I arrived, Alicia would be back to face the reality I'd left behind. Around noon, she called to let me know she'd be home the next day by 4 p.m., asking if I'd pick her up from the airport. I told her I had errands to run and wouldn't be able to make it, and then, casually, I reminded my neighbor to have his video camera ready for her surprise. The next day, I was almost at my friend's place when Alicia called again, her voice frantic. "Jamie, the house. It collapsed. It must have been the snow." I barely unlocked the door when the roof just came crashing down. "Our house is gone," she screamed, her voice breaking. Feigning calm, I replied, "Don't worry, Alicia. I've made other arrangements." "How can you be so calm? Our house is destroyed," she shouted, her panic giving way to anger. "Because it didn't just collapse from the snow," I said coldly, the truth finally out. "I made sure it happened. I did to our house what you did to our marriage. Good luck finding a new place to live. I'm almost at my new home." Then, I hung up, savoring the stunned silence on the other end. Not even a minute later, my phone rang again. It was my neighbor, sounding shocked. "Jamie, you're not going to believe this. Your house just collapsed. It looked like the snow brought it down. But honestly, there wasn't nearly enough snow to cause that much damage," he said, still trying to make sense of what he'd witnessed. "Your wife's okay, though. She was just opening the door when it happened, and the whole place fell in on itself." I asked him to send me the video when he could, thanked him, and then turned off my phone, ready to fully focus on my new life. It's been almost 3 years since I settled here in Colorado, rebuilding my life from the ground up. I stay in touch with a few friends back in Minnesota to keep tabs on any news, but I avoid contacting family directly so that Alicia can't accidentally trace me. From what I hear, she's had a rough time getting back on her feet. One that, if you ask me, is well-deserved. Word eventually reached me that Alicia had finally gotten what she wanted. She was pregnant, but with Michael's child. In her desperation, she'd started spreading lies, claiming the baby was mine and that I'd abandoned her because I couldn't handle fatherhood. Even my own mother believed her at first, eager for a grandchild. I wasn't about to let that stand, so I had a friend discreetly reach out to my brother, suggesting a DNA test for the baby. If the child were mine, it would show a close match with my brother's DNA. If not, there'd be no match at all. Alicia, confident in her story, agreed to the test. The results came back, and it was exactly as I expected. I wasn't the father. Furious at the deceit, my mother cut all ties with Alicia, even kicking her out of the family home where she'd been staying. Alicia's attempt to lie her way to stability had backfired completely. As for Michael, he'd gotten more than a bruised ego. The 2 men from the resort had given him a brutal beating, landing him in the hospital for over a week. When he finally limped back home, more of his ex-lovers were waiting, ready to confront him over the chaos he'd caused in their lives. From what I heard, he left town shortly after that, humiliated, and it was rumored that the injuries from the fight cost him a testicle. His days of messing around with other men's wives were over. With Alicia and Michael both getting what they deserved, I was finally free. My new life in Colorado felt like a clean slate, and I was more than ready to leave that chapter far behind me.